Well, welcome back, guys. We out here. Shout out to my co-host.
Oh, the Topo.
Sponsorship, huh?
Hey,
Sponsorship. We're
what are
already
the
that.
odds,
Hey,
What are
They're
the
not. They're not paying me or anything. But if they would like, it saved my life, man. All right. So the art of collaboration. All right. We're gonna jump in. Top. I was gonna do 5, but top 3 collabs, and we're gonna start off with movies. It don't have to be a Christian movie. It can be secular movie. But top 3 collabs. We're gonna go movies, food, and then we're gonna do probably songs. So top 3 and ensemble of people, right? You know what I'm saying? We talking.
In-game.
In-game. All right. We're gonna do one at a time.
You already know what I'm gonna say.
Okay, in game. Like you said, in game.
I bet I know Jay Lost.
Rush Hour.
1, 2, and 3.
2 and
Yes,
1, 2,
let's
and
go. Let's go.
Bro, when me and Jay Law first hung out, I was like, bro, like black people, we love this movie. How do y'all feel about this movie?
Right.
He was like, bro, that's our junk. I ain't know if it was mutual. It's mutual.
Amen.
My top one is Captain America Civil War. That's my number 1.
Oh, another Marvel. Okay.
Yeah, you can't. It's hard to beat Marvel.
Tough to beat.
I feel like Avengers or Marvel kind of mastered the collab.
But so we'll probably get into this, right? But
Yeah.
the idea of like meshing your own projects into one project is a new thing. Like, like movies, especially like hero movies, they're such big undertakings. The idea of like collabing and like meshing those stories and making those intertwined. Marvel really set up a whole new wave. Like,
Sure.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's not something that was just really done before. So this is a newer wave.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Notice ain't nobody put none of them DC joints in there.
I know.
Whack,
Dang, we're throwing them.
Honestly, when I was little, I loved when Disney Channel would collaborate like the shows. So it would be like Sweet Life
Them
of Zack and
crossovers
Cody
were
with.
dope.
Yeah.
What are we talking like Camp Rock? Like the
Yeah.
Jonas Brothers?
Hey, everybody don't know about that, bro. Yo, you know
Hannah
what used to
Montana
do?
and like Sweet Life and Zack and Cody.
Yeah,
They would come together. It was a vibe.
I'm ready for the food one though.
Bro, fired up. I got.
All right, here we go.
We talking about like combinations of food, right?
Yes.
All right.
If your number 1 is not my number 1, you're wrong. I don't care what you say.
Well,
OG classic. What you got?
I know this is no one's number 1 because you gotta. Whoever's listening, you gotta go and try this the next time you eat a hamburger. Hamburger with peanut butter, bro.
I've heard about this.
So
good.
Stand for it.
I've heard about it. I've never done it because
It's good, bro.
a rational
Promise.
human being.
If anything goes with peanut butter, it's jelly or jam if you're feeling froggy. Bro. Like, you know what I'm saying?
There's this thing like for Hispanics where we get like Takis or hot Cheetos or something like chips, and we put cream on it. That's like a really good snack.
Huh.
Like, hear me out.
I've seen the nacho cheese on like the hot Cheetos
Yes,
and
it's
Takis.
like
I've never
that.
seen cream though.
Yeah, it's cream and cheese and Mexican cheese and lettuce.
It sounds like that's gonna tear you like the lining of your stomach up. It sounds like
Next
it's not
time
a good
I
time.
see y'all tomorrow, I'm bringing y'all some.
Fired up.
Bet.
Fired up.
My top 1 is spaghetti and meatball, bro. Here we go.
That's a
On the
hand to hand. PB
That's
and
a
J
good
spaghetti
one.
meatball. That's a hand to hand. Okay, I got round 2.
All right, here we go.
Pizza
my
and
second.
wings. Hand to hand.
Ooh, pizza
and wings. That's a hand to hand. Now get your peanut butter out of here. Get your pineapple out of here.
And your honey, bro. if
That's-
Bro,
That's
I'll
called-
put honey
that's
on
called a
my
cheat
pizza
meal.
and pineapple.
Yo,
Does this
I got
have-
my third. So y'all give y'all second. I know my third.
I got
too.
my second.
Does this have to
is-
be like an established thing or like our thing?
He just said peanut butter and burger. Nothing is
Okay.
established.
nothing is
Nothing is
established.
established.
no more.
Yeah, J-Law threw me off when you started
I
that
was
out.
like, whoa. Here we go.
Nothing's safe. Yeah,
Hey.
but you go wherever you
Go
want.
try it. Don't
Okay.
yuck my don't yuck my yum.
Don't yuck
That's
my
all.
yum. I respect that.
I got a classic one for number 2 is milk and cookies.
Mad respect.
Yes,
All right.
mad
Never
respect.
go wrong with that.
Maverick, yeah.
Mad respect. Hey, whoa. What is Milk's favorite cookie?
My favorite cookie?
No, Milk's favorite cookie.
They law. You got one opportunity.
We're gonna vote you off this island.
no.
Bro. What is Milk's favorite cookie?
I'm not
Is it
having.
Oreos? Oh,
That's the church say, amen.
thank goodness.
All right.
Have you guys ever tried like McDonald's Sundae cone with French fries?
Oh yeah.
That is
That's-
a vibe.
That's a whole
Yep.
vibe.
It
That's
is.
a whole vibe.
Wait, say that. What is it?
McDonald's
It's like dipping your fries in a milkshake.
Yeah,
Oh, in the milk. Yeah, for
Ice
sure.
cream,
For sure.
yes.
That's a classic.
that's a vibe.
Man, I mean, my go-to, you can never like. I don't think I've ever had a bad chicken Alfredo.
Mm.
I was just
Respect.
thinking about
Like
that.
if you ever nervous, you don't know what to get, you can always go with the chicken
It's a
Alfredo.
safe food. It's a safe
Period.
food.
True.
Okay.
Safe food. You can't mess up pasta.
Jacob is
Mhm.
speaking facts.
So to collab, we're talking about working jointly on an activity, especially to produce or create something, right? So let's jump into like top. We ain't got to do top 3. You know what I'm saying? Just one of the top events that like collab events that that just recently happened. I'll say One Day LA. That was
Sorry.
that was very crazy. Like that was a dope one.
Yeah. Who was responsible for that? Like who was I know everybody was involved, but who like spearheaded that?
From what I hear, it was Justin Bieber. That's from what I heard.
Wow. Okay.
I'm not sure if that's actually true or not.
The bees.
Yeah.
Well, so what I think was really dope about that too was like it was such a tight knit collab. I couldn't tell who was over it. It was kind of just
Right.
like everybody was, which I think is the heart behind like a good collab, right? It's not like I'm doing something and bringing you along with me. It's more like we all in on this so much so you really can't tell whose it is, you know?
Right.
I would say one of the top collabs that could have happened but still happened, if that makes sense, is the Virgil and Vu Church collab. Because it was happening, it still happened, but it couldn't happen to the full capacity. And that's just like crazy to me.
Yeah.
How that was ordained, like that was planned to happen, and then Virgil passed, and it was like this moment, like an ultimate collab now, because it will never happen again type thing.
Right.
That's kind of
I mean, I would say that's one of the top collabs that I've like ever heard of. So they have those, I think it's the Latino musical artist that goes to their church, and Rich is pretty connected with. But they brought in Andy Mineo. They were gonna bring in Virgil, I would assume, because Virgil's the one who texted Rich about doing it.
Yeah.
It was kind of his thing, and they kind of made it a conference. But they had literal. It was so obvious that it was a part of the creative. Like it wasn't a conference for like you didn't feel like it was churchy. It was like a creative conference, and it was the first one like that.
Yeah.
Like they had paintings on the wall. Like they actually had like visuals. It wasn't. It was in a warehouse type thing. It wasn't on a stage. I mean, they had a stage, but it wasn't like in the sanctuary. Like come to the church to the sanctuary. Like,
Well,
it was
I saw clips of it, and it seemed much more conversational than preachy. It seemed much more like we're expressing things as opposed to teaching things, and it definitely seemed like something that was like a gathering of creatives, right? Like a space where it's not like you just can predict everything that's about to happen. But I only saw clips of it. I didn't know if that was the main thing of it. It sounded like that's like the main vein of what they were doing.
Yeah, I saw clips of it too. But I would assume so. I don't know how the rhythm was throughout the weekend.
But it probably was like even from the clips I saw, it wasn't like a majority like, oh, this is a church service, kind of like you're saying, versus like an art thing, or like this is an art thing and less church. It was like perfect, like sync of both things.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same way, I would probably say like to keep it a little local, like the one that almost all of us were at last year, Maverick City and this vintage store called Common Regs.
Oh,
That collab was just crazy to mix like
That was
worship and
dope.
singing like that. Like a lot of people weren't expecting. Like a lot of people were like, I mean, some people knew Maverick City, some people didn't. But like Maverick City has this amazing praise and worship and all this, but then you have vintage, you have all that stuff, and that was just like that was such a sick collaboration and event.
Yeah. Seattle
Yeah.
Fest was too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sick, yeah.
So for those
Maverick
that don't
City.
know what that was, tell them what Sierra Fest was.
It was an event with a lot of, I guess, Christian rappers. And they had Maverick. Well, they had Joel, and
yeah.
they had a tattoo artist there too.
Come on.
Yeah, she was fire. I'm
Let's
talking about
go.
was tattooing Maverick City people and stuff. I was like, dang, that girl.
She was all right, but
Bro, you better shoot your shot and tell folks you be doing this for real.
Let's go.
Nah.
So what made it so dope? Like when you think about like some of the top collabs, like what makes it so dope? Is it how like no one person is bigger than the other, and or the product that they produce was so great?
I think like to take Maverick City as an example, like there's been worship collectives before, but I don't think we've ever seen a collective like what they do. You know what I'm saying? Like Hillsong has a collective, Elevation Worship has a collective, Bethel has a collective, but there's always like a church or a thing that's kind of like saying this is our thing. Maverick City, just in the last really 5 years, 3 to 5 years, has kind of like put their stamp on what worship sounds like in a lot of spaces. Like there's a range of churches that are vibing and it's followers of Jesus that are vibing with their music. I think it's because they have a range of people who are worshiping God, right? So you bring somebody in who has a deep, charismatic, almost like Pentecostal kind of background, and you pair that person with someone who's much more like of a, psalmist kind of person, and it's like they somehow make both work. They brought folks from United Pursuit and Will Reagan's bunch, people who are much more like on intimate, what I call barefoot worship, like those kind of settings. And then they still bring in like Chris Brown from Elevation, who's like bigger production. And because they have so many people that are coming in with a heart to worship Jesus, you don't get a style of worship Jesus, you get just worship of Jesus. So anybody can have an entry point, which I think is especially dope.
Yeah. I think like why they're so good and why like the collabs that we listed were so good is because the focus, like if you can have a really good collab, like the focus is always on the content and it's never on the people that are collaborating.
That part.
Yeah. Do you think it was easy to collab with one another, or like what makes it difficult and easy to collab with other people? I would say like if it's not what makes it easy is the humbleness of it. Like I'm not trying to be bigger than you. I'm not trying to make my gift more important than yours. You know what I'm saying? It's the gift made room, right? We talked about that in previous episodes, right? How our gifts makes room for us and bring us before great men. It gives us a chance to, share and work with one another, right? So when you have, people who are humble about their gift and they realize that the gift is not theirs, it's the Lord's, right? And it makes it easy when you don't have, there's no ego, right? It makes it very easy to kind of work and be fluid with one another, right? So like what makes it, what are some other things that make it easy to collab?
I think definitely being humble, but also having the same shared end goal of everything. And so if my goal is different than the other person I'm collaborating with, then there can be conflict and just
that's Amos.
Make it hard.
Yeah, Amos chapter 3 verse 3 talks about two can't walk with each other unless they be in agreement, right? There's a need for us to say there's some commonality behind what we're trying to do. It may not be the same giftedness or even the same expectations, but we have the same kind of heart that says, I'm with. So this is language like with like John Wesley and his whole like posture around ministry, right? I think one of the solid phrases that came out of that whole idea was like, if your heart is as my heart, then give me your hand, right? Like if we have the same heart for this Jesus, if we have the same heart to see the culture reach, if we have the same heart to see the lost being found, then we ain't got to agree on all the small stuff. But because this is where our heart's at, like I'll put my hand to the plow with you.
Yeah, yeah, and then like a more practical term too, like I've always learned this when working in teams or like in ministry or even like on projects is like when you can define what a win looks like, if everyone can like agree on what a win looks like, then you're going to be able to collaborate well because you've all agreed on that thing.
I think another thing that makes it easy right now too is like we're on a call together all in different places geographically. Like I don't think there's ever been an easier time to collaborate. You know what I'm saying? Songwriters are writing songs from whole different continents. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. People are sending scripts for movies and plays across like the map. You know what I'm saying? And we really have no excuse geographically anymore. Not even really on time, because you can make time for stuff you have passion for. Like we live in a day where like in our cultural moment, there is no practical excuse around being able to collaborate. The heart piece seems to be the more important part.
Right. Yeah, like when your heart is not matching up with one another, like there's this imbalance. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's one is I'm just trying to come up, right? I'm attached to a big name and not for any reasons but to get more followers or get more press or get more attention, right? And that I think that's what makes it difficult, right? Because J Law said something about discernment, right? Like, discerning, like, hey man, you gotta kind of know your audience and know like what you're putting out and who you're working with, right? And you kind of gotta have this relationship built that, like, it may not be all the way mutual, like as far as I'm pulling my weight and this person is they don't have such as a big a following, but I'm gonna bring you alongside me and then we can amplify each other, right? So I think like what makes it difficult sometimes is like expectations are different, right? We don't have the same end goal.
Whenever people look out for each other, it's definitely makes it way easier. And when people have pure intentions, for sure, for one another.
Flo, going back on what you mentioned, how it's like at what point is it ever been easier to collab? But is easier better? I even think creatives find it harder now to collab because it's such a cloudy market now. Yeah. That there's so much of it that how can you separate yourself? Because like I heard Pastor Ura McManus say, the commodity is the new, or creativity is the new commodity. And I think that's beautifully put, because the only way that you can separate yourself in such a networked world, in such a world that we're connected to each other, is to be creative. If we're in a creative space to where our mission is to be a creative, like I'm in the business world, right? And to be creative is easier in my world because people don't think to do it. But if you're a creative in a creative space and that's your main mission, it could be a little too crowded, right?
Yeah, crowded market.
And so how do you deal with, because going back on what Lo said on like, yes, it's easy. It's easier to collab, but what if the collaborations, there's so much out there that how do you separate yourselves in such a crowded market now?
Well, and I think like what you're getting at is, so the other problem connected to that is because it's so easy to collaborate now, there's kind of like this built-in assumption that people should collaborate with you, or you know what I'm saying? Like you kind of have this expectation.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's quite entitlement, but I guess it's a false sense of expectation that like because it's easy, you should just collaborate with me, as if you don't have other priorities or God hasn't given you a charge to do something else. And so I think that because it's a crowded market, right? And we say crowded market. There's no rationing in the kingdom of God. So I'm not saying that creativity is like a bad thing. We have to like maneuver around each other. But I am saying because you may have a heart for something and want my help with it or want me to connect with you, the assumption that I should be able to do it because it's easy to do it may not necessarily produce the right kind of heart posture or the right kind of collaboration. I think one of the areas where we struggle a lot with this whole idea of collaborating is not just amongst individual creatives. Like I think that's probably an easier place, but when the church gets involved, it becomes a little more messy. Like there's like churches have not always been good at collaborating. Churches have been good at commissioning, or churches have been not so good at like, soliciting. Like I'm soliciting like help from you, but it's not a mutually beneficial thing. Like for it to be a collaboration, I think there has to be mutual insight, mutual ownership, and mutual benefit. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And if it's just one party driving the thing, like I was just hanging with my homeboys tonight, who we may end up having on this pod or do a highlight reel with, but he's a videographer. And I was saying, yo, we would love to do a highlight reel on you. And he was like, yeah, it sounds like y'all trying to like encourage creators to do stuff for the church. And I'm currently trying not to do stuff for the church no more. And I was like,
oh, wow. Okay.
Say more. And he was basically saying like, I've been hired by the church, to do some work and then not been paid for it. Or there's been the expectation of, because I can do and I have time to do, that I should just do, as if I don't got to take care of my family as well. And it's like that broken sense of, you should do something for me, or it's not mutually beneficial. Like we honor the work that you give. It makes for a toxic environment for collaboration because people can get abused and taken advantage of.
Absolutely.
Well, then it's not so much collaboration. It's more like a favor.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh.
And eventually, if you're just like requesting favors from people, which I'm not saying there's not a space for that, but say that. Don't call it a collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, we won't need help. If I have a dream, then I shouldn't go after someone and say, "Hey, you want to collaborate?" If really what I need is their help,
Yeah.
And so then it's more of a favor.
Yeah.
So differentiate when something is a collaboration and you're benefiting that person and you're helping them too, or if it's actually something more beneficial for yourself.
And you said this last time, Ellie, right? Like, like manipulation comes across as like there's something spooky in that. I don't want to
for sure
delve into like manipulating somebody for the sake of Jesus, because Jesus doesn't manipulate us. That's right. Like if we are trying to be Christian creatives and do Christian collaborations, then Christ should be the center of it, and we should carry ourselves like Christ. He don't manipulate nobody. He's very upfront with his agenda.
Yeah, his intentions. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with one of my cousins tonight. And there was this Christian artist working with this secular artist, right? They were collabing on this project. I think they was making like some type of film, right? I can't remember what type of film was it. But how do we feel about like Christian artists connecting with or collabing with like in the secular world? Like, is that a no-go, or is that like something that what should the focus be? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because the church, we're gonna have our eyes on it, right? And with our eyes is not like the Lord's, right? So it's like there's gonna be some pushback, and I think there's great healthy pushback, right? You know what I'm saying? Like image for image, purposes and stuff like that. But how do we feel about collabing with a Christian creative, right? Collabing with somebody in like the secular world, right? Because now keep in mind, we established in previous episodes that Jesus is going into spaces, right? So just keep that in mind.
See, that's where Adrian, that's where my mind went, was like Jesus is entering into those spaces, but when does it start to get a little, the water starts to get a little muddy when you're producing content that's fixed, that's like it's out there and you can't change it. And so people have this reputation of what you are creating, and that is automatically labeled onto you. So that's a reality, And so at what point do you sacrifice to what people care or think about you and your reputation on the content that you purposely put out, versus saying, oh, well, Jesus went out and he was with the sinners as well, right? And so I get, what is that balance? I mean, my personal opinion is communicate well. I think over communicate
in that area of like, hey, I would love to work, talking from a disciple of Jesus to one that is not a disciple of Jesus, to have the conversation of like, look, I acknowledge your work. You've got a gift, but this is my convictions. Can we find compromises? And I think if there's conversations that happen, then and the content starts to hurt someone, and you can't control what everybody thinks about you. At least you have that to go back on. Of like, hey, I had the conversation. We made compromises. There was a heart check. At least there's something that you can go back on, that you express your convictions at least. So, that's a question for sure.
It's a tough piece.
It's muddy water sometimes, man. Like, cause you don't know, like, if it's going to be, beneficial.
I think like a lot of it boils down to how much you've already worked on like your foundation and how much you know your things. Because if you go into something, let's say you're like, oh, I have this chance to collaborate with someone, this really big person that's secular or whatever, but you don't have a foundation of what like you are convicted to, like you'll be so much more easily pushed to do things that you weren't prepared for. And like I'm gonna keep this real short. You can cut this out if you want. I'm gonna bring it back to this one story, but Nehemiah, like in the Bible, he wanted to rebuild the city, and that's like, if you think about it, that is a collaborative effort because he can't do it by himself.
Yes, that because he like solicits the help of a government.
Yeah, like exactly. But here's the thing: if you read it, he goes through the city by himself and doesn't tell anyone, and is like, this is what I need here, this is what I need. And it like specifically talks about him not talking to any of his friends or anyone that could sway him until he knew exactly what he wanted. And then he's like, okay, now I'm ready to collaborate because I know what's needed.
Come on.
Boom.
Real G's moving silence like lasagna. Come on, cousin.
Can't stand you.
No, so go there, right? Scripturally speaking, we know that Jesus ate with sinners and that he served sinners. Did Jesus ever collaborate with sinners? John 4, Jesus is at the well and he tells the woman, give me a drink. Partner with me, right? Like there's an interaction there. And he says, if you knew who I was, if you knew what I bring to the table, you would have asked of me, right? Like this conversation they're having is like for ongoing thing. Jesus has a whole conversation with Matthew, right? Like Matthew's a tax collector, and Zacchaeus, this wee little man, right? I have need to stay at your house. You're a sinner. You would have disqualified yourself from grace, but I need you. So we're going to collab. I'm going to stay at your house. And I'm going to bring grace to your home. Like there are several moments where Jesus is not just like blessing broken people. He is like requesting aid from and adding value to those people as well. Like I think he collabs with sinners also. So I'm gonna give a good example and a bad example of this happening in our culture, right? Kanye with the Sunday services, which is a dope collab. I don't care what nobody says.
Right.
Like the songs and those experiences, even though Kanye was in a fledgling state of his faith, there was some beautiful music that came out of that, beautiful artwork that came out of that, and some dope moments and transcendent moments for people. And you're on the front end, you're like, yo, this is a dope collab. On the back end, you find out that people weren't getting paid on time. You find out that Kanye was very legalistic in his early understanding of the faith. And so he was like, yeah, you can't be drinking or smoking or any of that stuff, which may be a valid thing to say if you don't want anybody doing that stuff on your project. But then you look at where Kanye is right now, and he's very not opposed to those things. So I think that collaboration was one of, compromise, and maybe it didn't end in the healthiest way. But I can still see how the Lord had used that, right? So then go back to like Martin Luther King Jr., right? We just celebrated MLK not too many weeks ago, right? And like Martin Luther King is very much a Christian, like Christian thought leader, like preacher, pastor, like that's his lane. And yet he had no problem at all collaborating with those that have a strongly different faith. In fact, and not for fear that their faith would permeate into him, but hope that my cause, like my heart for this cause that we're all in, is furthered by the gospel. So if you have a heart for this cause, I'm expressing my love for the gospel and God's love for you by chasing after this cause and this collaboration. So I think that collaborating with the right heart and the right intent, even with those who aren't believers, I think there's a valid space for it. But I think it does have that element, what you're saying, Jay Law, like I've already postured my heart around the need. I've had me time, me and my Lord time before I bring collaboration to the table.
Yeah. Because I mean, like you mentioned this last week. I think like we often try to separate the two, right? And the Lord is in all of it, right? It's not the world versus the church. It's not even about that. We have the light, right? And I'm not going against you. I'm with you, right? I'm trying to bring you in to let you know, hey, there's grace over here, there's love over here, right? So, and then like you run the risk of the idea of collaboration versus competing, right? You have two competing wishes, two competing expectations, and that's not just with the world and the church. That's within the church too, right? So like, when you think about collabing and when you think about competing, like what can be like what makes those look alike, right? And to keep people from being deceived about that.
I think we all have an appreciation for excellence. And we talk a lot about like, not giving God our half or giving God anything empty, but like we want to execute and give the best that we have in light of our heart for the Lord, which I think is valid, and we yes and amen that whole thing. But I do feel like when we play football, right? Like our coach used to always say, competition brings out the best in you. Right. Like in certain realms, competition does make you better,
Right.
And there should be an element of like, I'm legit trying to kill it, in every regard of what I do. And if me looking at somebody else like killing it, like motivates and inspires me, then sure. But I think when it tips over into I'm trying to do this better because of you versus I'm trying to do this better than you, that's a slippery slope. And the idea that I want to do it better than you for the sake of, not for the sake of reaching people, but like I want to be seen more. I want to feel like I'm more valid because I do something better than you. Like I think that language is super harmful and it doesn't advance the kingdom at all. I personally feel like I know people who are better at so many things than me, and my first and foremost motivation to like or heart to tell my motivation is wrong in something is I can't appreciate what God is doing in somebody else's life because it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough. That means my motivation in that area is wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if I find myself second guessing my calling or second guessing my giftedness or bad mouthing your calling or your giftedness, then my heart posture is not towards the kingdom of God. It's toward the kingdom of low. And the kingdom of low will lead me to be a hater, honestly.
Right.
I think competition essentially is rooted in insecurity and selfishness. So if you're competing and you want to be seen, I feel like a lot of times it's a lot of insecurity and just trying to be validated,
Yeah.
And when you don't care about those things, you truly are humble and you want to be a blessing to not only the people around you, but to your community.
Yeah, it makes you're not serving anymore, right? Because we've all come together to serve, right? To produce something that serves the community. But when you get into, and it hurts when it comes from within the church body, right? You know what I'm saying? Why are we competing against one another? Like, there's, like you said, there's a such thing as healthy competition to push one another, right?
Sure,
You got that, but when it's unhealthy, right? We're to get, whether it's for churches, whether it's we need some more money than you, or we got this type of program going, or we got these people to come out, and we're on the spotlight instead of serving and being a part of something greater, right?
The worship context that we grew up in, me and H anyway, was like, you can worship is more expressive than not. I find myself serving in a lot of Methodist setting these days, and y'all can learn a thing or two from how to be a little more expressive. But the negative side of that is when that competition kind of sets in. It's almost like who can sing the best, who can shout the best, who can do the most runs. You know what I mean? It's like it's no longer a posture of worship. It's a posture of like performance. You know.
Yeah.
And I think it's what competition does. It robs us of being able to worship through our gifts. Now we're just performing through our gifts. Right. And the difference is my performance elevates me. My worship elevates Christ.
Come on.
Like if you're looking at how good I am at anything and it elevates self, that's not worship. That's strictly performance. Mm-hmm. But if I'm killing my craft, right, in a way that's like, yo, this gift or this space that it's helping to curate it only comes from God, and it's furthering the gospel and letting people know just how good God is. That's worship, you know. That's elevating His work, not my own. And so I think that's what competition corrodes our ability to be able to worship with one another. I can't collaborate with you if I'm trying to be seen more than you. I'm trying to like be better than you. Like that ain't a healthy environment. Rather, like the church that me and Jacob go to right now. There's a segment in the worship service pretty much every Sunday. They'll stop and pray for another church and pray for the pastor and pray for the leadership, and pray for the staff. And I mean, the first time I came, I was like, bro, they just doing that to be seen, right? And then I got to know the church like behind the scenes, and like I'm learning like they don't just pray for other churches, they give to other churches. Wow. They support, like if other churches like don't have a worship leader, they'll send a worship leader there. Like the whole point of His house is to like legit see the kingdom of God come, not just through their building, not just through their staff. Yeah. Like that's a whole different way of thinking about Jesus that I haven't seen modeled a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was gonna add on, not only is competition usually rooted in insecurity and selfishness, but also fear. Because I feel like competition just is very carnal. So someone might be very talented and gifted, but there's a difference from being talented and being anointed. And
talk that talk.
E flat.
Come on. Here we go. Tune her up. Yeah.
I mean, we all know worship leaders or people that had a beautiful voice, but you can differentiate when they actually have or bring the presence of God into a room. So whenever you truly are humble, you don't really seek, and you truly have a relationship with God, you don't seek competition or to be seen. And God's the one who elevates you. So if I see competition, or if I see somebody trying to be seen, I'm like, well, first of all, there's something behind that. There's either insecurity or fear that you have to do it yourself, and you haven't learned to rely on God and for Him to wait to open those doors for you and to elevate you.
You know what's crazy to think about is like Jesus collaborated with like the 12 disciples. Like He didn't have to, didn't need them, you know? Yeah. And I think he probably could have flexed a little harder without them. Like they were more, like he had to bring them along, you know what I'm saying? In so many ways. And I think the lesson for us in that is like, if the point was just excellence or just for giftedness to be seen, Jesus never would have called the 12. If the point was to make a really good garden, God never would have put Adam and Eve to work, right? Like the point is not just the work or just like the flourishing. The point is co-creating with God and co-creating with each other. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like, if we want to collaborate well, we have to say that the posture of us working together is good enough fruit for us to do this. Even if it don't end up being awesome, everybody ends up seeing it. Just the partnership of working with a brother or sister in Christ, seeing God alive in you, and us co-creating together, that's big enough of a fruit to say we should do this together.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to the motivation of the collab. It's like, are people in it for the end goal, or are people in it for the process? Because if you're in it just for the end goal, are you never really going to create well because you're not enjoying the process? And so that's why I agree with both of y'all. Is like we live in a culture that promotes just get to the end, and I'm thinking for my own. I'm so convicted right now because I'm very competitive. I have same age. Like I'm in a competitive market. I say not a market, a competitive environment. I'm literally in it that promotes it, with a boss that's saying it's just keep going, like get a good grade on the test, you know. And part of it is like I'm struggling because it motivates me. But then if I really get real with myself, Ellie, I'm like, yeah, that's from a hard insecurity, you know? And so, but where I'm finding the peace is like, but why can't you just enjoy the process? And so you can get to the end goal, but how you get there can be a lot easier if you actually enjoy it.
Yeah,
and so I think for the creatives out there is like, man, it might not be the end goal is gonna be there, but enjoy the process. Because
for sure.
because many end goals that lead up to a greater end goal is better than just focusing on the end goal.
You know what's wild about that, bro? Like Jesus never says I'm the destination. He says I'm the way.
I'm the way.
I'm the journey. I'm the process. God, I might preach tonight. That's what,
that is
like,
so good. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. Here we go.
I know. So me as an artist, you know, it's been like 2 years since I started my craft as a tattoo artist, and I'm at a point where, well, what's next, or how can I become better? And people ask me like, what do you need to do better? Or, you know, I feel like a sense of like competition, because anything with like with the creative world or an industry like that, it is competitive. But for me, it's really about enjoying the process. And I've seen God just move and open so many doors for me where I'm like literally so secure in the Lord, where the next steps or what the future holds, because I'm like, God has literally done everything. So whenever you really rely on the Lord, you learn to just have peace in that, and to enjoy the process. You know, I don't have to strive to do better, you know, and it's baby steps, literally. I like that song from Maverick City. It says, "Baby steps, my child."
You ain't baby nothing, but you make daddy proud.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. Like God is proud of us. It's really just having that peace and security from the Lord, you know?
So my baby girl, she thinks she's so helpful these days. Like she for Christmas, not because we're running a sweatshop or anything like that, but she like was asking for like cleaning material. So we got like this little toy broom, little toy mop, toy dustpan, all that stuff. And like it says on the package, like, this is a toy. You can't actually clean with it. She doesn't care nothing about that. Like she thinks she can actually clean the stuff. And really, she gets in the way more often than not. But the process of like hanging out with my little dude, like, even though she ain't doing it right, even though you're actually in the way, like you actually making it worse. Baby steps. Like you make daddy proud. Like to think that God thinks that way about every jacked up poem I write, every failed performance, every time I don't make time for his people. Like I'm in process, and he loves that. Like he love and as a creative, I think you need to hear that more often than you actually do. The same way you are working on your craft and it's getting better and getting better and getting better. That's how God sees you. Like as far as your process and everything. But how he sees your heart, you're a child. You're not a project. You're not a craft. You're not a gift. He don't see what you can do and hopes that one day get there. He loves you now. He is into you right.
I'm gonna start crying.
Yeah,
bro, that's so true though.
He loves you now.
That's so good.
Here's the thing. He doesn't say, "Hey, let me walk in the room when you start. I'll look at it and then I'll leave." He says, "Let me paint with you." Like,
I'll throw this at you, boy. You better.
Look, Jacob said, I missed last week. I'm coming with fire.
You gotta come in hard.
I'm coming with fire.
Let's go. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Cry too, Ellie. Wait, come on. Just give me a minute.
I mean, because it hits home with me. Like y'all seen this. I've been yawning. You know, I'm tired, and I think the tiredness comes from not that I'm staying later to study, but from my inner drive to compete. That I force myself to think it's healthy, but then when I actually take time to think about it, it's insecurity. And so But notice what word I said. It takes time. But how many of us don't take time? Whereas God says, let me just paint with you instead of walking out of the room and waiting for you to finish and then coming back in.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, man.
Because that's what most of our views are.
I think this is another part of why collaboration is so important, because if I'm so focused on just me and what God has put in front of me, like I'll make that the point, and it's like it's my only focus. You know what I'm saying? And there are moments when you rub up against another believer and you see like, oh snap, God is at work outside of just me. Maybe he's not dependent on just me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that moment where Elisha's like, Lord, I'm tired. I'm about ready to give up. I'm the only one that ain't bowed down. God's like, oh, actually, there's 3,000 ain't bowed the knee. You know what I'm saying? And you need that reminder to know it's not just you. You're not the only one tired. You're not the only one being faithful. You're not the only one trying to figure this out. And God is faithful to show us, like, and I think it happens in collaboration, right? Like, you are not alone. There are others like in the same process as you, and that can be encouraging to like remind yourself it's a process. If I see somebody else in process, you know.
Yeah.
And we don't get that if we're only showing everybody our highlights and we're like, no, I'm done. I'm out. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just a word for everybody. You don't graduate in the kingdom of God. There's no graduation. You've never arrived. Everyone's in process. And so if we stop showing these curated versions of our walk with Jesus and we show up authentically, sometimes in collaboration, every time just in relationship, it offers much more encouragement than not.
And don't forget that whether you collabing or you working along, God holds the reward, right? He knows what the end is going to be. And he just asks for you to trust him, right? And not only trust him to be with you right now, right? Don't be so focused on grinding so hard by yourself, right? Because you're really not alone. Well, you may think you're alone, but he's always there, right? And he's my portion, right? Forever, right? And he's with us every step of the way, right? Whether I messed up here or this collab failed, or I may think I failed at something, God is your reward, right? Don't lose that. Like that's something that we can easily lose sight of when the end goal is so far. When you think the end goal is so far, but my end goal, there isn't one. I'm always working with the Lord. He's always partnering. We collabing every day, right? To produce because he's making us more and more into his image, right? So it's like as we go out and collab with one another, don't lose focus, right? The focus is not to be seen, but to be together, right? And be excellent in what the Lord has given you, right? So
why or where do we need to see more collabs as followers of Jesus? Where do we need to see more collabs in the faith?
Publicly.
Say more,
please. I think it's hard to say more because that's the point. I don't think there's enough. But I think it's still going on. I don't think everybody's doing it alone. I think they're here it is. Hey, if you are thinking about doing a collab, do it. If you're out there hearing this, do it. If you are wondering about texting that person, calling that person, or if a person's coming to your mind
right now,
listen to this, do it. Because what's the end goal? At least you get a new friend out of it. At least you get a new idea out of it. That's the point of creativity. You step into something. And what I love about creatives, I would say they're the most faithful people because they have to be. Like I get encouraged by creatives because they step out into things that they're like, I didn't know that was going to happen. You start literally with a blank sheet and you go, I'm going to create. So I would say make it public, but not out. Now check your heart, not out of like to become famous, but to say I'm collabing and it's okay to collab.
Yes.
That's what I'd say.
Go take those baby steps. Like there's a reason why parents find so much joy when the babies start walking.
Ooh, act like my fat boy and start walking 2 weeks ago.
I told y'all. Did I just tell y'all before he got on the car? I was like, you think, hey, when he get to walking, it's gonna be a problem, boy.
Oh man,
tearing down mirrors and everything.
Look,
I'm gonna hop on with Jacob too. Like when we talk about publicly, and I'm not saying we don't need stuff in church anymore, but I think we need more people that love Jesus that want to collaborate to do it in public. Like don't be scared.
Okay.
Don't be scared of if you go do it at a coffee shop in the middle of your like don't just limit it to it's got to be in a church building or it's got to be co-signed by this pastor or whatever. Like go do it in the world.
But
let people see
that familiarity of doing it within the church, like it feels safe, right? Like comfortable, right? But Jesus doesn't knock that, right? When he sends the disciples out, he said, "Hey, go with a friend." Like don't go out by yourself. Like you go 2 by 2, because I want you to carry a certain element of that comfort. Like, right? Like I want there to be something that goes with you that makes you feel like you're not by yourself. But y'all ain't pairing up to stay home. Y'all pairing up to go out. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that word to do it publicly is such a good word, because I think that's the thing that the world needs to see. You know what I'm saying? Like Jesus says, they shall know by your love. Like they shall know you're a mine by the way in which you love. And you can't show God's love isolated. You can't show God's love, no matter how big your dream or your passion is. Like you can't show the love of God on an island. You need to be in relationship. And I would say that if you're excluding, like showing God's love in your craft, you have robbed your craft of all the merit of it actually being connected to the kingdom of God, because it can't be of God if it's just of you. It has to be bigger than just you. I sent y'all a message. One of the homies was like, "Y'all want to jump on the joint with y'all, right?" Like we ain't put out but a whole episode. You know what I'm saying? And I guess 2 or 3 by the time this drops, whatever. But like, and it's not because we have dope production. We are all on cell phones on StreamYard. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I think there's a substance to just us having conversations as creators, collabing together. Like, and we've been journeying together for like months now, some of us years. But like, there's fruit in that. You know what I'm saying? I think people want to latch on to. So if you are a creative, like plug in. We want to collab with you too. Because our belief is that God has not given.
Get him, Jacob.
Go ahead.
Get him.
Yeah. God is up to something that's bigger than just one person, one heart, one dream. It's gonna take collab for it to be kingdom.
Come on.
Amen.
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 We can tear out of here.